Alright, before we start, I just want to say if you have seen all the episodes of my review, then you can skip to this timestamp and you can just watch my thoughts on the series as a whole. If not, just sit back, relax, and hope that you enjoy. Alright, let's get right into it. So, the Kenobi episodes came out today. It was a 2-episode premiere, and I'm going to be giving my thoughts on it. I'll be using clips from the trailers because I don't want to get claimed, even though this video will get claimed. I want to use fair use. I'll only use clips when I really need to emphasize a point. But yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it. So, just want to give a big spoiler warning, obviously, because I'm going to talk about the content of the show. Please go watch it. I do really recommend it. I think it's pretty good. But yeah, so we start off with a quick little recap of the prequels, and I think that it was really well done. It basically just shows you everything that you need to know up to this point. So if someone was, for some reason, new to Star Wars and starting off with this show, which I don't know why you would do that, but if you're like a kid, then you'd be able to understand what was going on. And then we get a scene from Order 66, which will be interesting to see how all the versions of Order 66 videos start to change up as we go throughout the years. And so after the Order 66 scene ends with the younglings running through the temple and the Jedi that was trying to protect them ending up dying, they transition to 10 years later with Obi-Wan being on Tatooine. Now, they don't start off with Obi-Wan. If you remember from the trailer, there's a shot of the Grand Inquisitor getting off of the ship and walking through the streets of Mos Eisley. And that's pretty much what it starts with. And they go around looking for a Jedi. And at one point, Reva, who's a pretty important character, and she's probably going to be pretty much the main villain until Vader shows up, decides to throw a knife at somebody. And Nari, who's another Jedi, he's not super important, but he decides to stop it with the Force and hold his hand there. Okay, so that's the first problem, right? That's the first problem of the entire show. Okay, why did you're a Jedi? Okay, why didn't you just push it? All right, or pull it towards you so that it looks like, or try to make it look like it didn't get pushed from your side of the room. Like, you're a Jedi, and this guy's pretty old. He looks like he's in his late 20s, right? And this is set 10 years after Revenge of the Sith, so he's probably 18 at the end of the Clone Wars. So he's 5 years into his training as a Padawan. He should know things like this. Now, maybe his master just kind of sucked and he just wasn't trained right. But yeah, just wanted to get that off my chest. Okay, and then we get to Obi-Wan, who's working now as a meat cutter. Wikipedia says he's a meat packer. He doesn't really pack meat. I mean, he steals meat, which is understandable given how little he's paid. And in fact, you even see one of his co-workers getting their pay halved for literally no reason. It's just that the guy just felt like doing it. And then we see Obi-Wan buy a toy for Luke, drop it off at his house. Nari comes to find Obi-Wan, and this comes to another interesting scene that I personally didn't have too much of a problem with. Now, Nari talks to Obi-Wan and is like, hey, we need to fight. We need to get back at these Sith for taking the galaxy. And obviously he's not saying get back, but we have to win. And then you hear the lines from the trailer, we lost. Which, yeah, and it's clear that Obi-Wan is really cynical, and he points at Nari's lightsaber, who he's holding it in a weird way, but whatever. And he goes, if you want my advice, take that out into the desert and bury it. live a normal life, which honestly is pretty good advice. And I understand why Obi-Wan's so cynical. I mean, he saw a guy that was fighting for the light side his whole life, right? And he's known him for years, over like 13 years at this point. And then he saw him turn into this evil monster, and obviously his morale is going to be low. And he's suffered under the rule of the Sith for over 10 years. So people are acting like, oh, he's supposed to be like the same Jedi he was in Revenge of the Sith, where he was just kind of, laughing, joking, and not as downtrodden as he was before. Like, I don't know why people expected that. I mean, it's completely nonsensical. It's something I like to call Luke Skywalker syndrome, where people just can't accept, or no, Aang syndrome, which is seen in Luke Skywalker. I called it Aang syndrome earlier today, and I was like, oh, it's a good idea, and then I just messed it up there. But anyway, Aang syndrome, where people have this idea of what they want a character to be later on in their life, and it just doesn't come to pass. Now, with Aang and Luke, I don't like how they ended up. I think that it could have been done a lot better, but it is what it is at the end of the day. What can you really do? That's just my views on it, and I feel like this is another case of Aang syndrome, or Luke Skywalker syndrome. You can call it what you would like. So then we shift over to Leia, who is trying to avoid a public appearance and ends up getting taken from the woods where she's running around, and she has to be brought back so that she can meet with her cousin. She has a really tense conversation with her cousin, and she ends up getting forced to apologize. We're going to come back to that later. But Obi-Wan, so he finishes his job, and it's pretty much the same scene as the first time we saw him. He steals the meat, he goes, he punches his time card, gets paid, he gets on the transport, goes back home, gets his whatever that thing animal is called. I have no clue what it is. But anyway, Owen comes up to him, throws a toy at his feet, and is like, hey, we don't need you, stay away from Luke. And after that, we see Leia go into the forest, and the last time she got taken out of the forest, we saw the head of some guy watching her, right? And then we see that guy in the forest waiting for her. Boy, there's a lot of problems with this scene. So she's standing there, right? And she sees these three guys like come up, and then she starts to back away. And then she runs into the woods. Doesn't turn around and go back inside. Like, what was the thought process? Like, what are you doing? You could have, and given what we see later, when she's running, like, barely running. She's like 3 feet tall. She can't run that fast. She's a 10-year-old girl, and there's two men chasing after her, clearly not running as fast as they can. And it looks like she's about to get away. That's the craziest part. It genuinely looks like Leia is about to escape. And she's using all these like shortcuts and like different routes to get away from them. And I think they were trying to like illustrate how savvy she was, which is what they should have done to even justify the fact that there was a chase scene. Like, have her like back up a step and then duck behind a tree or something, and then they're like, oh, go get her. It would have still been ridiculous and weird that the chase scene lasted more than 2 seconds, but it would have been a little bit better. But eventually they do catch her, which is good, because I thought that she was going to get away, genuinely. Like, it seemed like she was going to be able to escape. So after that, Bail Organa and Beha Organa? I know I'm saying her name wrong. It's the first time we see her on screen. Happens to call Obi-Wan, because that's their only contact, because Ferris Olin doesn't exist in this universe. But yeah, whatever, you get what you get, I guess. Anyway, they call Obi-Wan and ask him for his help, and he says, "Hey, I'm not the man I used to be," which makes sense. He hasn't gone on a mission in 10 years. If you were to give up what you did for 10 years right now, if I were to, let's say I play basketball, right? I play in the NBA, and then I just leave for 10 years. I'm not going to be the same man I once was at basketball. I mean, look at George Foreman for an example, right? He left boxing for 10 years, and obviously he was able to come back and rise above and regain his title, but it took time. He just didn't come back and was immediately the best heavyweight. It took time. He had to refamiliarize himself with the sport. But anyway, Bail Organa comes to Tatooine, which is insane because, like, how long did it take for him to, like, it takes weeks for a person to get from Alderaan to Tatooine, and we know that from A New Hope. Like, what's going on? Like, how long has Leia been captured? I mean, obviously, we find out later that the only reason she has been captured is because Reva is trying to draw in Kenobi. But this personal visit from Bail Organa convinces Obi-Wan to go dig up his lightsaber, and he sets out to find Leia. And that wraps up the episode. Overall, it was a pretty good episode. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing Order 66. I mean, I know I was pretty critical of it, but I really enjoyed the confrontation between Owen and Reva. I thought it was really harrowing. Obviously, I know that Owen's not going to die, but still, like, just to feel that fear of the town and, like, wonder what's going to happen. Like, it was just insane. And to see the fifth brother save Owen, and that eventually be the downfall of the Empire. Even though if Owen had died there, I mean, things might not have unfolded as they did. I mean, I don't know, maybe Luke, like, goes after Vader too early and something happens. I don't know. But anyway, it was a pretty good episode. I really enjoyed it. It was great to see Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan. He knocked it out of the park. He was the best part of it. I did not expect to see young Leia. I didn't know what the main conflict of this was going to be, and I thought that it was going to be chasing down, like, Leia's kidnappers, but it's not, and we're going to get into the second episode now. So it turns out that planet that we saw that I was theorizing might be Nar Shaddaa. It's basically like a canon equivalent, as far as I can tell. It's called Dayu, and when he first gets there, he's approached by this dealer who offers him death sticks and a bunch of other, Star Wars spices. But the one that did stand out to me was glitter stem, and because of the reason it stood out so much was because of the fact that it was pretty pivotal in Han Solo when Legends was still canon and not called Legends. Back when the Han Solo trilogy was Han Solo's backstory, basically that's what Han was carrying when he dumped out his spices to escape from the Imperials, and also Jabba was using that same spice when he was called by Han, when Han told him, "Hey, I dropped off your spice." But after talking to a dealer who gives him some sort of spice, I don't know what it is, but it does become important later. Obi-Wan is taken to a Jedi called Haja Estri, who at first I thought was a Jedi, and then he was like, I thought he was like a Imperial agent that was like tracking down people that were like trying to leave and being like, oh, this person might be force sensitive, and collecting a fee. No, he was just getting people off, but he was doing it in like a scummy way. He was like taking their money. It was like a single mom and her kid, and it was just a bunch of silly stuff. Anyway, Haja tells Obi-Wan where Leia is, and Leia goes to rescue her. He gets there and is ambushed, and he takes a couple hits, which again makes sense. He hasn't been fighting like he was like back in. If this happened like in the Clone Wars or like right after Revenge of the Sith, I'd be like, that's ridiculous. Why is he taking hits then? But it makes sense. Like, again, you're not going to be as good as you once were. Like, after having such a long time out of the game, you're just not going to be as good. But anyway, he gets trapped in a room, held at gunpoint. He gets his lightsaber taken from him, which I'm sure will be a meme at some point. And he uses a short little opportunity, drop the spice, put up his gas mask. Instantly, all the guys in there are pretty much floating. He goes and rescues Leia, takes her out, and then the Grand Inquisitor and Reva start working against each other. And if you remember from the trailer, there was a picture of Obi-Wan that was circulating from the trailer. You see it, like a picture of Obi-Wan back in Revenge of the Sith, and she puts out a bounty for him, and pretty much the entire city is after him. And it gets to the point where there are two bounty hunters shooting at Obi-Wan, and he looks kind of overwhelmed. And in between this time, right, between the bounty being given and these two bounty hunters shooting at him, two important things happen that I kind of skipped over, so I'm going to talk about them now. So, first off, Haja gave Obi-Wan coordinates to a cargo bay that he could get on a ship to go to like Mazapu or something, some new planet. It'll be interesting to see that in episode 3 next week. And he also said, hey, I'm going to stick back and I'm going to hold off Reva for you. Now, obviously that goes horrible for him because he's just a guy with a blaster and he just gets did in completely. He has his mind probed by Reva and she instantly knows where he's going. Also, when Leia sees the picture of Obi-Wan floating around, she's like, oh, you must be the real kidnapper. Oh, I gotta get away from you. They kidnapped me to get me away from you. And then she runs away. Now, this is where you've been out of the game for 10 years kinda goes away, because you're still a Jedi Master, okay? 10 years still. Like, how is she getting away from you? Like, I understand, like, you don't want to use the Force because they'll sense you. That I can kind of, reconcile in my brain, but like, run after her. He's just kind of pushing, he's like nudging people aside, like push people out of the way. Like, getting Leia is more important than pushing a couple of people out of the way. Like, this is the future of Alderaan right here. This is one of your closest friend's daughter who's running away, running to be stolen. And eventually Leia runs up onto the roof and she's running away, and Reva sees them from like a couple blocks over, and she's like parkouring over to them. It's an alright scene. I like what she's doing. It looks pretty smooth and everything. And so everything comes together. It's not told like that in the story. It's the Haja thing. It's the Leia thing, then the Haja thing, then the bounty hunters are shooting at him. But eventually, Obi-Wan takes care of the bounty hunters, and Leia decides to jump off of the roof. She's trying to jump from one roof to the other, and she just falls. She grabs onto a cable, and Obi-Wan reaches out to her with the Force, obviously, and he can't get her, so she falls, right? But then he reaches down with the Force, and he starts to strain. And this is something I didn't like, okay? Because Obi-Wan's always been like a really harmonious guy.
So like it would have been nice to see him like sort of calm down and sort of slide into that oneness that made his Sarisu so good. You know, especially in Legends, like the reason he was able to defeat Grievous is because he had a wall of defense and he would just slip into this quasi oneness with the Force, and his blade would be guided by the Force. Another thing that's pretty well established is that you can't strain. In fact, Inquisitor Valorum, who I'm about to draw more parallels with, was straining too when he went to grab his lightsaber and he ended up falling down a plasma duct, the same thing that Maul fell down in the end of The Phantom Menace. And you're pretty much told, even Ferris says, like, hey, even Padawans learn, when you use the Force, you don't strain. Obi-Wan's not a really straining character. If he's straining, he's probably losing. I mean, look at when he first got kidnapped by Maul and Savage. Like, he's straining there, and he gets beat up because of it. Because he's not in that calm, cool, collected, hey, I'm General Kenobi type of state. But anyway, she lands fine, and then, like, Obi-Wan is off the top of the building in, like, 2 seconds. I wish they had shown him, like, jumping down, because I'm sure that's what he did. But, like, it's a small quibble, honestly. So then, they go up to the cargo port, and Reva follows them there because of the probing of Hodge's mind. And so, I was looking at the wiki story synopsis just to make sure I didn't miss anything, and she says, the wiki says that she's talking to Obi-Wan through the Force because Obi-Wan sends Leia onto the ship and is like, hey, I'll be right behind you, don't worry, okay? And then he's standing in there with his lightsaber. I thought they were about to duel, and I was like, oh, you know, well, I guess this is the end of Reva, you know? And she was like, Anakin's alive. She told him Anakin's alive. Now, this is something that people die for, okay? If you know this, you will die. If you know this and you don't die, you are either Obi-Wan, who ends up dying anyway, or the Emperor, alright? Or later on, Luke, and then Leia, and a bunch of other people. But at first, it's such a closely guarded secret, right? There's so few people that know. In fact, it's such a big reveal when it, like, Last of the Jedi. I keep making Legends references, but I feel like it's done so much better. If I'm not mistaken, I think Inquisitor Malorum knew about it too. And you know what? If Malorum had lived past his duel with Ferris, Vader probably would have killed him, honestly, just because of he doesn't want that secret to be out. Like, how did she figure this out? Like, this is such a big thing. Like, I remember Ferris Olin, right? One of my favorite characters. Last reference, and I'm done. I'm going to talk about the rest of the episode. I mean, he spends so much time trying to figure out this one secret, investigating Padme's death, doing all these different things. And then Reva just knows? How does Reva know? And yeah, it's over for her, pretty much. As soon as Vader finds out that she knows. And it finds out that she's been spreading it around. And it's just insane to me. And it's crazy that that's how Obi-Wan learns about it. Now, Ewan McGregor obviously acts it very well. He has a really good reaction. And yeah, that's the only positive thing I can say about that reveal. And then the Grand Inquisitor shows up again, and Reva kills the Grand Inquisitor. Now, when I say kills, I use that word very, very lightly, because I highly doubt that she really killed him. Because given what happened with Rebels, I doubt that they would retcon one TV series with another TV series. Somebody said that, oh, that was a different Grand Inquisitor, and they're going to replace him with another Grand Inquisitor. What? Why would they? I mean, that's so ridiculous. I highly doubt that. I highly doubt that. He's not dead. It's ridiculous. And anyway, Leia and Obi-Wan escape to Mapuzo, and yeah, that's pretty much the end. We get a Darth Vader reveal. He's in a bacta tank, so he'll be showing up soon. I don't know what episode 3 is going to be like. Now, I had a lot of problems with this, obviously you can tell from what I've been saying. But all in all, like, I enjoyed both of these episodes. Like, especially episode 2 really had me, like, on the edge of my seat. Like, even though, like, obviously Leia's not going to die. But, like, I was happy for Obi-Wan being able to, tap back into the Force, right? And I was getting, like, the vibe that he sort of cut himself off from the Force, and he was like, oh, it's not worth it anymore, I can't do it, like, and so to see him get that triumph was pretty good, and I'm looking forward to him having more of a spirit, because, I mean, even from episode 1, it's been building up more and more and more. Like, I prefer for him to have an actual arc, and, be able to grow and learn from his mistakes with Anakin, which will help him for when he eventually will be teaching Luke. I appreciate that he is down in the dumps, as weird as that sounds. I wouldn't want a jovial Kenobi, like, ooh, the Empire's taken over for 10 years and I don't know what's gonna happen. Yippee-ki-yay. Like, I don't want that, and I doubt anybody else does. I'm genuinely excited for the first lightsaber duel, as weirdly shallow as that sounds. Like, ooh, can't wait until they cross sabers. But I do think that it will be a really fun episode once they finally get into that. Other than that, I'm interested to see what else they do on Alderaan, since this is its first, on-screen appearance in the live action, as far as I'm aware, unless we saw him in the prequels at some point. I don't remember, but I don't want to be like, oh, well, there was a scene on Order 66 when there was a Jedi that got, like, I don't know, there was like a 3-second thing, because I don't remember every one of those. It's been a while since I watched that scene. But yeah, I'm getting kind of rambly, so I'm going to give these episodes a rating, and I'm going to be out of here. So I'll give these a 7 out of 10. That works for me. I've seen a lot of people complaining about Reva. I know I said I was about to leave, but I want to add this. They've been complaining about Reva and basically saying that she's going to be the main character. I've heard that leading up, in the weeks leading up. It doesn't seem like that. It seems like they're going to be focusing on Kenobi and his growth back up into being the Jedi that we see in A New Hope. But I don't know. Nobody's going to be focusing on the show if it switches over to Reva, like, full time, like her struggle with the Empire to grow up and move past her humble beginnings, But yeah, that actually wraps it up. Thank you all for watching. Goodbye. Alright, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the new Kenobi series. A new episode just dropped today, so I'm going to be discussing that. The first time I tried to record this, I don't know what happened, but the audio just didn't record, so we're going to take another stab at it. And without further ado, let's get right into it. So we have a recap, which isn't really 100% necessary. I mean, it's been just a week. I'm pretty sure that everybody can remember what happened, but I can appreciate it, especially if you watch one episode and you come back like a month later. You don't have to go back and watch through all of the episodes just to understand where you are. Anyway, we start off with a scene of Obi-Wan trying to talk with Qui-Gon, and he fails. While this is going on, Vader is being reconstructed in the bacta tank that we saw. Well, he's out of the bacta tank that we saw him in at the end of episode 2. I'm guessing that they're trying to do some sort of symbolism of, like, Vader being, like, built up while Obi-Wan's kind of in pieces, but this isn't a video essay, so I'm not going to get too much into that. But after that happens, Vader and Reva talk about how if Reva can find Obi-Wan, she'll be promoted to Grand Inquisitor. When it comes to the actual Grand Inquisitor, I do not think that he is dead, even a little bit. Just given how not only he's in Rebels and he dies in that, it wouldn't make any sense for them to make a series and then later on make another series and retcon the ending of the series with another different ending. It doesn't make any sense at all. It would just be a waste of time. But hey, what do I know? Anyway, we find out that that big building that I was talking about when we were going over the trailer, is sort of like I want to say the Inquisitorius building from Legends, where they trained and did all their Inquisitor business. I guess would be the best word for it. But anyway, after that, Obi-Wan and Leia arrive on Mapuzo. They go to the point where Haja gave them the coordinates of. Nobody's there. So Leia sees a speeder that's coming by. It looks like a truck. And she has the bright idea of waving it down, right? So silly. Obi-Wan should have stopped her. He's talking to her, being like, what are you doing? He should be like, hey, like, put her hand down. Like, why would you do this? Like, there's no point. And it lands him in trouble. I don't understand why he didn't stop him. Like, his skills might have diminished, but that doesn't mean his brain power diminished. Whatever. And so they go up to the speeder that looks like a truck, and his name is Freck. He sounds like a famous cartoon character. I don't know exactly which one.
Now, where did you say you're from again?
He has to be like a famous voice actor or something. So someone let me know. But anyway, eventually some stormtroopers get onto the transport, and we get to see Obi-Wan still not be as sharp as he used to be, but still, have a little bit of a way of being in the swing of things. So there's this moment when Luma, or Leia makes up fake names for her and Obi-Wan. She calls herself Luma and Obi-Wan Orden. So she makes up a lie about her mother dying and Orden being her father. And so as they're riding along, Obi-Wan and Leia begin to argue. And at one point, Obi-Wan calls Leia, right? And at first I was like, oh man, they're just showing us again, like, oh, he's not as sharp as he used to be, and he's not that good anymore, and he sucks now, just basically being like, yeah, he's still bad. Alright, let's just trying to hammer that home. But he showed that sort of contrary to what I said earlier, that his brain power still is, pretty good, and he was able to think on his feet and being like, when the stormtrooper called him out and being like, hey, you called her Leia. You said her name was Luma. And he was like, oh, Leia was her mother's name. And I called her that. It gets hard some days. Sort of like Kenny with Duck and Clementine. Check out Walking Dead Seasons 1 and 2 if you want to know that reference. But anyway, stormtroopers eventually get off, and then Freck drops them up to a checkpoint, gets out, says, hey, I figured you might want to check these guys out. And so they hop out, and a probe droid flies towards Obi-Wan, and they tell him, put your head up. Put your head up. Obi-Wan sits there, waits for the probe droid to scan his face, and then shoots him. Like, if your plan was, oh, I'm going to shoot the probe droid, and then fight all these guys off, shoot the probe droid before it can finish scanning you. Don't, sit there and be like, well, gotta make sure that it scans me so that Vader can come and get me, and I can be chased around by him. No, that's not a good idea. You're Obi-Wan. You might have all these things that you're dealing with, and you're still downtrodden, and you're still feeling bad and guilty, and you're, down in the dumps because of the fact that Obi-Wan's still Anakin is still around, but there's still that feeling of like, hey, like you gotta speed it up. I hope you can hear me. Snapping. But anyway, he fights them all off, and then he fought off like 6 or 7 troopers, right? And then a transport of 3 roll up, and he just looks at him and then surrenders, right? At first I was like, why would you surrender, right? But then I thought about it, and Leia is standing like right next to him, and Leia is very, very important, and there is a chance, however small, that Obi-Wan could like get her shot, and then what was he gonna say to Bail? Oh, I was trying to fight him off, and she got shot. Sorry, bro. It happens. It wouldn't have turned out too good, more than likely, just given how rusty he is and how often, like, he even got punched in the face like not a minute before that. So he's still sloppy, and in fact, now that I say this, there's probably like a good chance he probably would have gotten shot. So he definitely made the right call. But anyway, the officer that came with the 3 stormtroopers shoots them all in the back and is like, hey, I'm one of the rebels, basically. But she doesn't say that, but she basically is, right? And so they get up, and Tala goes in her safe house and then motions them across the street. Obi-Wan doesn't put up his hood. Don't know why. You're still Obi-Wan. You're still famous. Like, he was considered a war hero. It's only been 10 years. Like, in 2015, right, if even McGregor walked down the street, you'd be like, oh, that's Ewan McGregor. If I could say his name correctly. Yeah. Jeez. Maybe he was like using the Force to conceal himself. I don't know. It's not super important. But when they do get in the safe house, Lola has a nice meeting with one of the loader droids that's in there that is very clearly a human in the suit, which never has really happened for me with a droid before, where I'm like, oh, that's just a human wearing a suit. But I don't know, just looked, the way the droid moved, it looked too human-like. I'm sure if you've seen the episode, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But anyway, eventually they go into the secret room that Tala has, and there's a bunch of engravings on the wall. And Obi-Wan sees an engraving of Quinlan's name, and then is someone who I'm sure you're aware of this, but for anyone who isn't, he's basically a Jedi who helped out Obi-Wan in season 3 of the Clone Wars. Pretty good episode. I prefer the Legends version personally, but I still think he's kind of cool in the Clone Wars. Apples and oranges. But anyway, they're going to go to Jabim, but then Vader shows up, and Obi-Wan almost has like a panic attack because he's just feeling the presence of Anakin like so strongly. And then they head into this tunnel, the secret passageway that Tala has, and then Obi-Wan makes the decision to trust Tala, which, I mean, at this point, if you couldn't trust her, she'd probably like have turned you over. And he goes back to lead Kenobi Vader away, which he does pretty successfully. Vader is at his most scary in this episode. In fact, he's definitely the scariest I've ever seen him, like at any point in Star Wars ever, right? You can feel the fear of the town as he's walking through, yanking people out of their houses and, ripping walls off of houses. It's insane. And then he goes after Kenobi, and of course Kenobi is afraid of him. And their fight is mostly like, it feels like a horror movie scene. Like when, it's almost like that scene in one of the Friday the 13th movies, Jason Takes Manhattan, where that black guy is sort of like trying to fight off Jason, and Jason just it's just standing there. And then with one strike, he just takes out that guy completely. That's what it felt like. Just, you can't stand up to this guy, and Kenobi's trying so hard, and his hair's in his face, and it just feels so visceral and like real. And it feels like you can also feel the fear of Kenobi in the scene, just being so scared of Vader, and so like almost regretful of leaving Anakin there, because he's like, now I have to deal with him, and he's so strong, and I've been out of practice for 10 years. I think that they're going to build to a fight where Kenobi defeats him in episode 6. That way they don't retcon the line. When we last met, I was but the learner, now I am the master. Things of that nature. I think it would work really thematically where like Vader's only wins over Kenobi are when he's like really lording it over and like his pride's kicking in. In fact, his pride sort of lets Kenobi escape where he's just like, oh, well, it almost feels like Vader thinks, oh, this is too easy. Like, I expected him to be as powerful as he was on Mustafar. I'm gonna let him go. Because I don't see any other reason as to why he would just let him get away. Tala, like, okay, so Vader burns him, right? Then Tala shows up when one of the stormtroopers goes to pick him up. The Lord of Droids comes, gets Kenobi, they get away. So, while this was going on, Reva had went to the safe house, had found a tunnel, and was going in. Somehow, when Tala left Leia, she just didn't like cross paths with her at all. Like, I thought there was gonna be another like showdown like she had with Haja in episode 2. It just didn't happen. I don't know why or for what reason. Doesn't really matter too much. I guess what's more egregious is because like maybe she's like, I don't know, stuck past her, but like then once Tala's gone, right, Reva somehow gets in front of Leia, kills the pilot, and is standing there waiting for her. I was like, what? And then Leia turns and takes off. Now, that's the end of the episode. And hopefully, like, Leia isn't, like, able to, like, get away from her or something, like, at this point. You know, seeing how she deal with the, last chase scene she had. In all reality, I highly doubt that she's gonna like escape, given that Reva's like a Force user, and that would make literally no sense. I said last time that Reva and Obi-Wan were gonna fight. They do. Obi-Wan will probably like destroy her, like on the level that like the 5th sister got destroyed by Ahsoka in Rebels. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. I definitely got the sister name wrong, but that's not too important. We had 2 Legends references, and if you know me when it comes to Star Wars, I love Legends references in any medium. So, first one happened after the stormtroopers had got off transport. Obi-Wan and Leia were talking about Padme, but of course Leia doesn't know about Padme. And Leia was like, Obi-Wan, are you my real father? Which was a pretty good question. And Kenobi answers, says, I wish I was. And then he talks about his family. He's like, I remember a mother and father, and I think I had a brother, which is a plot point from Jedi Apprentice, which is a series I've recommended before and I want to recommend again because it's really good. And then we had Jabim, which was pretty big. I'm sure if you've read Star Wars Republic, you'll know. Yeah, it's Star Wars Republic. Yeah, just mentally checking there. But anyway, you'll know about Jabim and what a horrific battle it was. If you can't get your hands on the comics, just look up like there's probably a Star Wars theory video about it. Just look up the Battle of Jabim and you'll hear about it. I'll give you a quick synopsis here. Basically, it was just this horrible battle. There were like 6 or 7 Jedi and Anakin there, and all of the Jedi except for Anakin die. So the Republic decides to withdraw from the system, and Anakin has to make the choice of whether or not to let the civilians go or the troops. Anakin picks the troops. He leaves the civilians, says, "This is your fight now," and he's gone. So yeah, that's pretty much what happened on Jabim. Hopefully we'll get like a scene of Hayden and Obi-Wan like on Jabim in that like period between when Ahsoka came around and like Attack of the Clones. I really think that would be interesting. Hopefully we just get more Clone Wars live action scenes in general in the coming episode. And yeah, that wraps up my thoughts overall on the episode. Thank you all for watching. Bye. Okay, so today we will be discussing episode 4 of the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. This was the shortest episode so far that we've gotten, so this will probably be the shortest review. Without further ado, let's get right into it. So, Obi-Wan and Tala finally get to Jabim, and there was no talk of like, oh, this used to be like a separatist planet and we were abandoned by a Jedi, which, was a little unfortunate, but So, Obi-Wan is in Bacta and so is Vader, and so we get to flip between the two of them a lot, and once again, just like episode 3, showing the parallels between them. Obi-Wan gets out and is like, hey, where's Leia? And then we see that Leia has been captured, and we find out that I was right when I guessed the building is called the Inquisitorius. That's where she's being held. So Obi-Wan wants to go, and Tala is willing to go with him. There's a guy that doesn't want him to go because he's like, hey, I can't risk it. My wife was a Jedi. They found her. You can't escape the Empire. It's just too risky. He eventually comes around, but we'll get into that later. So Tala shows up, and her credentials get scanned, and she hasn't been outed as a traitor just yet. But the guy who's scanning her credentials is like, hey, this isn't your sector. And he's like, I'm your commanding officer. I'm in charge. Well, let me through. And he's like, oh, okay. Really thought that was really good. And it shows how very often rebellion spies would use the Empire's nature against it. They would use this sort of feeling of people like trying to connive to get to the top, like that guy who was put in charge of a Star Destroyer and ended up destroying it. Just things of that nature. Just using the Empire against itself. I really like that. So, while she's doing that, Obi-Wan is going around. Tala gets to a terminal and is guiding him, but then an Imperial officer comes to get Tala. Tala beats him up. I really thought that was pretty good. It makes sense, and it's sort of foreshadowing of what happens later on, and sort of gives sense as to why she's able to do what she does. So, eventually, Obi-Wan comes down the hallway, right? And there's some stormtroopers headed his way, and he's somehow able to get out of the way. I do not know how he was able to move fast enough for them to not notice him. Now, a pretty common criticism that I saw was that Obi-Wan hasn't been using his lightsaber. Well, he uses it pretty often in this episode. Obi-Wan says he needs a distraction, so they're pretty much building up to Reva and Obi-Wan fighting in episode 5, and then Obi-Wan and Vader fighting in episode 6, or some mixing of that. Maybe they both fight Obi-Wan in episode 6, or something of that nature, but obviously they didn't want them to fight here, so Reva gets called away. Tala is waiting for Reva in her office and is like, hey, I know where the rebels are. They're on Florum. Reva's like, you could be lying to me. I don't know if I can trust you. And honestly, she probably should be able to sense that she's lying to her, but it is what it is. Obi-Wan has this really cool scene where, so Leia's in the chair, and there's 2 stormtroopers on either side of her. Obi-Wan sneaks in, ignites his lightsaber, takes out one. The other stormtrooper freaks out and is looking around, and Obi-Wan appears next to him, ignites his lightsaber, and takes him out too. Saves Leia, and they start to go. All the while, Reva is still talking to Tala, and she's like, hey, I can appreciate a good liar, so I don't know if you're lying to me or for me. I don't know how she would be lying for her. So I guess you can sense when someone's lying to her, but only sometimes, and can't sense that she's like clearly just trying to lead her away, or if there's something deeper to this. I don't know. She just thinks that she's lying to her or for her. So anyway, Obi-Wan is going through the hallways. He's fighting off some stormtroopers. And we have a really good moment where he closes the door, right? Because he's fighting off the stormtroopers, and he closes the door because there's like 10 or 15 of them, right? And when he deflected a blaster bolt, it hit a window. And so the window is cracking, and it's about to fall in. So Obi-Wan stops it with the Force, tells Tala and Leia to get out of the hallway. So the stormtroopers get the door open, and they come through. Obi-Wan pushes pushes the crack of the window out at them so the water can come into the hallway, and then he runs out. Now, originally I was like, why is he so fast? Like, how is he able to get away from the water? I'm guessing he used force speed. It would just make the most sense. So anyway, Tala and Obi-Wan wrap themselves in Imperial cloaks, and Leia gets inside Obi-Wan's cloak. There he goes out into the hangar, and Reva chases them out there, yells at Tala, is like, "Oh, traitor!" And they surround Obi-Wan and Tala, and it looks like they're about to get captured or killed. And then two snowspeeders sort of deus ex machina their way over and save them. It could have been a really cool character moment, but if they had given us more scenes with Roken where he was like, "Oh, I kind of want to send somebody, but I don't want to risk it. You know what? Now I'll send somebody." I feel like if there was more build up, it would have been better. But anyway, the snowspeeders show up, take out most of the fighters. Then Obi-Wan and Tala get onto a snowspeeder. Another one distracts Reva by shooting at her. The eighth brother runs out, tells the third sister Reva to destroy the snowspeeder, and of course she hits the one that Obi-Wan isn't with like some sort of bomb. It blows it up. The lady driving the snowspeeder that Obi-Wan and Tala are on is like, "Oh no, wait!" And then they get on the ship, and Vader comes for Reva.
You were born what defeat would bring. I will tolerate your weakness no longer.
He's obviously angry, and Reva's like, "Wait, I have something. Sorry, I have an ace in the hole." There's a tracker on their ship. I put a tracker we find out it's on Lola, who wakes up with red eyes, which is weird because it's kind of like obvious then. Why did you change your eye color? But, All in all, I think this was a pretty good episode. I really like that it seems like Obi-Wan's getting more and more powerful as he's getting more and more acclimated to using the Force. Blocking blaster bolts, I'm glad that he did not have any sort of trouble with that. I mean, that's literally what his lightsaber form is designed for, Sarisu. Just pure defense. There were some weird times where like people were getting behind him and shooting at him, and they just weren't hitting him. Now, sometimes he would like knock blaster bolts back at them, or he would like dodge and like let the blaster bolt go past him, and then it would hit the guy behind him. But all in all, it wasn't like, "Oh, why haven't you killed him?" Like with the probe droid who was shooting behind him, it was like, oh, it's kind of malfunctioning. It makes sense that it's not shooting at full capacity. And the stormtrooper, oh, he got hit. So nothing too egregious. But yeah, thank you all for watching. Like I said, short review. Anyway, goodbye.
Okay, so today we'll be discussing episode 5 of the Kenobi series. We have one more episode to go. I'll be using gameplay clips from Obi-Wan in the Revenge of the Sith game. I tried to use clips from the show, but the video got claimed and it wouldn't get put up. I tried it again, it still wouldn't get put up. I didn't want to put the dancing anime girl over all of the clips, so I'm just going to put gameplay in and put a clip here and there just to show my points further. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So, like we talked about in the last review, Obi-Wan, Leia, and the rest of the Path, which is the group that they are currently with, Now, I'm pretty sure that it's the earlier, formations of the rebellion, the more radicalized areas of it. I didn't know that it was called The Path. I did a little bit of looking into it. I don't know if it's called The Path in episode 4. It definitely isn't in episode 5 because that's not brought up at all. But Reva is promoted to Grand Inquisitor. Now, this was a scene that was really interesting to me. At first I was like, well, what did she do to get promoted? All I could see, as far as I could tell, was that she was able to track down Obi-Wan, which is a really big thing. But I think Reva should have been able to be like, this is kind of fishy. And it seems like she's just so focused in on, oh, I got promoted, that she's not really thinking. But anyway, she goes to Jabim as well, and she is attacking the facility, and Obi-Wan talks to Reva. Now, this is a very interesting scene because Reva is someone who has been very antagonistic towards Obi-Wan this entire series, right? Now, Obi-Wan is known as the negotiator, so on a level, it makes sense. Now, if this was Anakin, obviously, like, this would never work. If it was Mace Windu, maybe not even Yoda. I don't even see Yoda having a scene like this, because Yoda can kind of be smug at some points. But anyway, they're able to talk, and Reva sort of calmed down a little bit, and they sort of have this candid conversation. Turns out Reva was a youngling, and Anakin somehow just didn't kill her, but killed all of her friends, and apparently she played dead. Maybe he like gashed her stomach a little bit, and she just fell over, and he just accepted it and was too busy just moving on. Was just so emotionally unstable at the time that he couldn't get through this. Now, this is something that got leaked, and that's how people were like, oh, so that's how she knows Vader's identity. So it turns out that Reva this whole time has been trying to get at Vader, and she's had a lot of opportunities, and when Obi-Wan's like, hey, I'll give you a shot at him, she's like, well, I could have already... Well, she doesn't even say that. I was thinking that she could have already done something about it, and she just didn't. And she should have brought that up, but she's like, oh, I don't need your help, which she clearly does, but we'll get into that later. But anyway, Reva doesn't want to talk anymore, and so she attacks the facility, cuts the doors open, the doors come open, and Obi-Wan is pretty much deflecting blaster bolts from like 20 people, and there's people around him shooting. This is probably the only Jedi where it would ever make sense for something like this to happen, just given the nature of his form, Sarisu, and given the fact that he is the master of it. I can accept that he was able to block that many blaster bolts. There weren't like a huge amount of people shooting at him, which is weird. Maybe they were told like, hey, you gotta leave him alive. In fact, that would make the most sense. Vader was like, hey, do not kill Obi-Wan. Like, you can shoot at him, but shoot to incapacitate, not to kill. Now, we've had a couple scenes interwoven through with Anakin and Obi-Wan dueling. This was really awesome. I'm glad that they were able to use Hayden Christensen and not just have him just in the Vader costume. That would really suck. It also wouldn't make any sense for them to bring him in if they weren't going to use him. He looks a little, like, old. I know that, like, he's not going to look exactly like he did in Attack of the Clones, which is the era that we get the flashback from, but it's sort of like they CGI'd him young, but, like, left parts of him looking like he does now, which, I mean, he's not insanely old. I don't even think he's 40 yet, but still, he looks older than he did in Revenge of the Sith, and so it's a little confusing, especially when Obi-Wan's like, you'll be a Padawan until you get yourself together, and it looks like he's older than Obi-Wan for a second. It's just is really weird. But anyway, a big point of that is Anakin knocks Obi-Wan's lightsaber out of his hands and says, admit it, you're beaten, right? And so then we get a flashback to Vader standing on the bridge of Star Destroyer, and then Obi-Wan is standing in a room that is blocked off from the Empire. Oh, a thing I forgot to add, because I was so focused in on the Anakin duel, is the fact that Tala died, and she got shot. The droid fell on top of her. The loader droid, he also got shot. And so she pulls out a thermal detonator and saves Obi-Wan, and sacrifices herself.
This is really interesting. She got shot with a blaster bolt, but somehow she was bleeding, like she had blood on her hand. It was really odd. I'm not going to show it here because of the YouTube rules about that. I'm not 100% sure. I need to learn those a little bit better. But anyway, that happens, and of course she's, gone because she blew up the room. I don't know how Reva survived. She probably used like force speed just to get out of the room and just left all the clones in there, because there are a lot of dead clones in that room when they go back in there. But anyway, back to what I was talking about. Obi-Wan surrenders right after the flashback of Obi-Wan saying, "Oh, give up, you've lost your weapon," and he gives his comlink, his blaster, and his lightsaber to Haja. Now this is pretty important because it will come up later. And he goes out, and Roken stops him and says, "Hey, how will you fight without a lightsaber?" And he goes, "There's more than one way to fight, right?" Or something like that, something to that effect. I'm just paraphrasing. And then he walks out there, surrenders, and goes to talk to Reva, right? And he's like, "Hey, I can bring you closer to Vader, and then you can make your move." It's weird. She's been close to Vader all this time. She, in the Inquisitorius, when she was getting trained, she's already fully trained now as an Inquisitor. Why didn't she take her shot back on the Star Destroyer when her and Vader were talking? And we see later, it's not like she has this big plan to take him down. She just strikes out at him. You could have come up with something better. You didn't have to rush it. But anyway, Reva sends Obi-Wan back inside, and Vader shows up. So Vader walks in, and there's a ship about to take off. So Vader grabs the ship and pulls it down, and starts ripping apart the ship. And while he's doing this, another ship takes off, and Vader just watches it. Now, I don't know if he was just so confused as to how he didn't see it, that he was just like, what's going on? I'll just let them go, honestly, because I can't even see why he would just watch them. I guess Palpatine won't be too mad about this. But as he's standing there, Reva tries to sneak up on him and slash him, and obviously it doesn't work, and he stops her. Right? Now, I don't know why she thought this would work. I was genuinely sitting there watching this what do you do? And you have a lightsaber. It's not like a sword, right? She could have walked up to him the same way Vader did the Starkiller. Just had the sword, ignited it, boom, it's already through him. Now, obviously, she wouldn't be able to do that. A, because he's Vader, and B, because he's in the original trilogy, and this is 9 years before that. But still, she could have had a better plan, and it just didn't work at all. So after that, Reva tries to strike out at Vader, and we can see the clear power gap between them. I mean, it was so embarrassing for her. Oh, Vader doesn't even look like he's considering pulling out his lightsaber. He just dodges around, it dodges around. It just keeps going, right? He's just making a fool out of her. And then he decides, oh, okay, you've done all this stuff. Here's what I'm gonna do. Reva starts spinning her lightsaber, and Vader reaches out with the Force, slows it down, takes the lightsaber from her, snaps it in half, and throws her at half. Now, if Reva was smart, she would have just ran away at this point. You clearly can't beat this man. He was dodging all your strikes easily. But she picks it up and starts fighting him. And then she loses, and Vader runs her through with the saber. So then she falls and hits the ground. And guess who walks out? The Grand Inquisitor. I was right. He's obviously not dead. Okay? You can't see me, but I'm blowing up party balloons as we speak. Now, this was so obviously not going to be the death of the Grand Inquisitor. I didn't even consider for a second. Obviously he's going to come back. We've had precedent for people coming back from those types of injuries before. In fact, the only guy who I can think of that's really died from something like that has been Qui-Gon. And Qui-Gon was extremely exhausted, and he was just, like, he was pretty old, and not only that, he was very much in tune with the will of the Force, and the Force was probably like, hey, Qui-Gon, it's your time, and Qui-Gon was like, oh, okay, alright, bye, Obi-Wan. Like, so it's different. Like, I can see how someone would be like, what? How was he able to do that? Like, how is he able to just shake it off? He's probably spent so much time in Bacta, and that's why he hasn't been around for so long. It's because he just recovered. So then he takes the Grand Inquisitor badge off of Reva. It was a really good moment when he did that. Just thematically, it looked so cool. I'm just a big fan of the Grand Inquisitor. I really liked him. Seeing him in Rebels, seeing how cool he was. And then Reva, who's been ran through, finds the comlink that Obi-Wan gave to Haja. And there's a recorded message on there from Bail, which I didn't even know that you could leave messages for people. I thought it was like a live calling thing. But anyway, there's a message from Bail where he's like, hey, I think that he could discover the kids, talking about Vader. I'm worried about Luke on Tatooine. Something to that effect. I'm, again, paraphrasing. It was really weird that he would name the planet. Because, like, what if something like this happens? What if the comlink is found by an Imperial agent? You know? Like, these things could happen. Obi-Wan's not the man he once was. And so, there's always that chance that something goes incredibly wrong, and then you got intel about Luke Skywalker in the Empire's hands, which would have been disastrous if they found him at the age of 10. Like, there'd be no way the Jedi would have won the war at all. But all in all, I thought it was a pretty good episode. I really enjoyed it. The fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin was awesome. I loved it. Like, the things like that are what I wanted to see, right? Like, I want to see, like, the Battle of Jabin. I want to see so many, like, things. Also, we don't get, like, enough of the Clone Wars, like, from, like, outside of the show, and even in Legends we had the miniseries, but, like, I'd like to see more of, like, the Clone Wars as, like, Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen. Or even, like, some, like, flashback where they, like, do some little adventure, like, from Jedi Quest. I'd love that. Just to see more of Hayden and Ewan McGregor all these years later would be absolutely awesome. It would just blow me away. And I think there's a lot of potential for that, and I think that they should do that. I really like how Obi-Wan was in this episode. You know, a lot of people are calling him dumb and stupid, saying that he's being led around. Well, I mean, he's pretty much in charge for this entire episode, so I don't know what people are going to say. And he gets everybody away on time. Now, the hyperdrive on the ship is broken, and that's going to be a problem. But, you know, that'll be dealt with in episode 6, I'm sure. Now, Leia did fix the doors of the hangar. That was something I left out. And Lola got her little chip that was like sort of an inhibitor chip. She got that removed by Leia. Leia found it within like 5 seconds. So I thought there was going to be like a mini boss battle. Like in that one episode of Clone Wars with the evil R2 and the real R2. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. I thought there was going to be something along that line, but there wasn't. And the Lola storyline got cut short really fast. She got found out really fast. Lola was not a very good Imperial probe. But yeah, I liked what Obi-Wan did. I mean, he didn't have to duel anybody. All he had to do was block a couple blaster bolts, and he worked really well. He stalled Reva for a good amount of time, and was pretty instrumental with getting all those people off the planet. Like I said, I mean, he accomplished his goal. I'm sure he's going to fight Vader in the next episode. I mean, at this point, he's going to have to, since it's the last episode. And, you know, when we last met, I was but the learner. Now, I am the master. You know, things of that nature. So, that'll be really interesting. And I don't know what's going to happen with Reva, considering she's going to be headed to Tatooine. because she's not gonna die here. She's probably gonna die in either the next episode or she's gonna become a Jedi. In fact, I don't even think she'll die because she's been going through this like insane injury. It just wouldn't make any sense narratively to instantly kill her the next episode. So it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing. Alright, thank you guys for watching. This went on a little bit longer than I expected it to, so I'm going to end it off here. Goodbye.
Alright, welcome back. Today we're going to be discussing the finale of Kenobi. This was the 6th episode in this mini-series. There's been some talk about a second season. I doubt that it's going to happen, but, you know, maybe there's some more story that they can tell, but I'm not too sure. Now, I'll be making like a full review of the series where I talk about like the story in and of itself as a whole. Today I'm mostly going to be talking about, you know, how this wrapped up the story and how I think it affected the characters and things of that nature. And then, you know, again, tomorrow will be, alright, so here's how I felt about this and this and that and how it all came together. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So we start off with a really touching Leia scene. Also, I do want to add, before we continue, I should have said this in the intro, but I keep getting claimed for using clips. So for the few clips I will use, they'll have the dancing anime girl over them, just so I can be 1000% safe, because it gets really annoying when I have to go back and fix like 30 seconds of a video and then another 30 seconds gets claimed. Don't want to have to deal with that. So Leia was mad at Obi-Wan for trying to go sacrifice himself again, which at this point, given how many times he's tried to do it, I was like, dude, nah, man, nah. It's just come up with a different plan. So then Obi-Wan goes off to his own because Leia runs off. Haja goes to talk to Leia, and he tries to reach out to Qui-Gon, right? And Qui-Gon, of course, is not answering. And Roken comes in and he calls out Obi-Wan and he's like, hey, you're just doing this for you. You're not doing this to save us. You're doing this to go after Vader. And then they sort of make up and they have this really nice scene coming together, which is pretty good because Roken was very standoffish towards Obi-Wan when they first started off, and now it seems like they're not exactly friends, but they're like close to it. Like if they were to hang out more, which they won't obviously because Obi-Wan's going to be on Tatooine, but if they were to, they would probably develop a very good friendship. So after Obi-Wan says goodbye to Leia on the ship, which I thought was a very good moment, he leaves on the craft that they used to get on the ship in episode 4, the smaller spaceship. He flies off in that, and the Grand Inquisitor is like, Lord Vader, we can't focus on one ship if we're going to stop these insurgents. Like, there's a whole spy network going away that way. Why don't we just take them out and just ignore the one lone Jedi? And I think that this moment was probably one of the most important moments in the series because it shows Vader's hyper focusing on Kenobi. Like, his ability to not see anything else around him, just tunnel vision on Kenobi. Like, Kenobi is the main goal here. Kenobi is someone that we have to take out. And this has been demonstrated before, like in that comic where he was supposed to protect the facility, but instead he hunted down a Jedi. And because he hunted down the Jedi, the facility got destroyed. But yeah, so Vader decides to let the spy network go. And he's like, we're going after Kenobi. He isn't just any lone Jedi, which I agree with. So Obi-Wan and Vader have their second fight, and I called it. It's just a lot more evenly matched this time. I mean, that was obvious. People were acting like episode 3 was going to be the last time they fought. That was so silly. Nobody would write any show like that ever, unless they just wanted to, you know, be ridiculed. So then Reva gets to Owen's farm. They try to fight her off any way they can, but obviously it's not working for them because they're not force sensitive in any way, shape, or form. And so they honestly kind of suck. But they are putting up a decent fight. Like, they're throwing things at her. They're slowing her down. Now, she is, you know, ran through. And I don't know if she'll make it, really. There's an ending where we'll get into that. But right now, it's kind of weird, right? So when we flash back to Obi-Wan and Vader, they're fighting in this area that looks weirdly similar to the General Grievous, like, third stage of the Revenge of the Sith game, which isn't a really important point. It was just something I wanted to throw in. So with these intercuts between Reva and Owen and Beru and Obi-Wan versus Vader, eventually Reva overpowers them, because even though she's, ran through, she still has the Force and a lightsaber, and Owen and Beru have blaster rifles and metal poles, so they're not beating her. Obi-Wan gets buried in a pit, right? And we've seen a lot of memes online. I'm sure if you've been looking at any of the memes about Kenobi, about how Qui-Gon's supposed to show up at the most dramatic moment possible, and I sort of agreed with them. I was like, oh, so this is the time Qui-Gon's going to show up, and we're going to see Qui-Gon here help Obi-Wan, get over himself, because even though he's like gotten stronger and he's gotten more powerful, he's getting closer and closer to that peak that he was at Revenge of the Sith. He still isn't there yet, and even Vader calls him out before he buries him. And no, Obi-Wan just thinks about Luke and Leia, and he powers through it because he knows that he has to go save them. So then Obi-Wan goes after Vader, and a lot of people were saying like, oh, Obi-Wan's just not powerful because, now he's just a straight white male, and all Disney wants to do is just knock down straight white males. Well, I mean, he's pretty powerful in this scene. Like, he picks up like 12 dozen rocks, and he like throws them at Vader, and Vader's like trying to deflect them, and he's getting beat up and stuff. And eventually, Obi-Wan cuts off part of Vader's mask, which is something that, funnily enough, Ahsoka cut off the right side of his mask. If we're standing like not facing him, we're standing on like where he would be counting the right side of his mask, and Obi-Wan cut off the left side of his mask. I think it's really interesting thematically, because Obi-Wan can sort of take the mask away from Vader, take away this evil from Vader. Ahsoka can sort of take it away, but it was only Luke that could get that mask off. It's sort of rudimentary the way I'm saying it, but I'm sure you get what I mean. Like, only Luke had the tools to like get that mask away from him and get that darkness out of Vader. I really like how they did the James Earl Jones, Hayden Christensen voice mix up, but then at points it would like cut to where it was like just James Earl Jones, and then it would be Hayden Christensen, and it was kind of weird. But then Vader, he's completely evil at this point, nowhere near turning back to the light. This is like 10 years before he's even considering it. So he's like, Anakin Skywalker is dead. I'm not Anakin, because Obi-Wan has called him Anakin. And again, this is a really good moment because it illustrates how far gone Vader is at this point. I mean, he had no hope of redemption, which is why what Luke did was so impressive, because he took somebody that even Vader and Obi-Wan thought was completely irredeemable, and they turned him back to the light. So Obi-Wan leaves him there, which is probably a good choice because Vader was getting pretty angry, and I don't know if Obi-Wan could beat, fully powered, super angry Vader, even if he's like super off base. And Obi-Wan can kind of exploit that. Obi-Wan in the fight was kind of doing a little bit too much attacking for me. I personally prefer when Obi-Wan sticks to Sarisu, because that is his established form. Literally every media he's in, he's Sarisu. He stands still. He doesn't move any more than he has to. He just keeps his blade close to him, and he strikes out. So Reva chases down Luke, and Luke falls down a cliff and gets knocked out. And Reva's standing over him with a lightsaber, and she can't kill him because she sees herself in Luke. Right? So you can kind of see that, like, the PTSD is what a lot of people were saying. I don't really understand PTSD enough to be like, oh, that's what it is, but that's what a lot of people are claiming it was, so I'm just gonna go with that. Hopefully I'm not like making anybody angry by saying that, but that's what it looked like to me. Anyway, Obi-Wan gets back like super fast. I don't Mapuzo is probably an outer rim planet, so maybe there's some like sort of connection there, but as far as I can tell, we got there way too fast, which is sort of a problem in all of Disney Star Wars. They sort of treat like hyperspace like it's just like this super fast shortcut, when no, like it took a week from Tatooine to Alderaan, right? Like these are long trips, and obviously they're not gonna show like, oh, this was a whole week. They're like, it just wouldn't make any sense for the pacing of the movie. Plus it was edited really well, and there were other things that had to go on, but like still, there's a lot of time that's spent between these things. Like I think there was like 5 months between when the Falcon left Hoth and when they got to Bespin, because of like simply just how long they had to go through space without their hyperdrive. So still, there's a lot of time just didn't get like communicated properly, and this is done a lot better in books because, you know, they were working more closely with movie creators at the time. But it's sort of small potatoes, but it is something that stands out to me nonetheless, so I did want to say something about it. Reva and Obi-Wan have a conversation where Obi-Wan is able to turn Reva back to the light, which was pretty interesting. They kind of set it up, and people are going to be like, how could you have redeemed her after all the horrible things she's done? I can understand not liking her. I mean, she's still a bad person in my book. She's got a long way to go, but like still, like Vader did like a lot of horrible things, and I'm still a lot more willing to accept his redemption, mainly because I saw it throughout a trilogy instead of a 6-part miniseries. Still, I don't know how people said that this was a bait and switch for Reva, but I'll get into that in the full series review. Palpatine and Obi-Wan have a scene, which is the second time I want to say that we see Ian McDiarmid, if I'm not being mistaken. And Palpatine says that maybe Vader was weakened about his feeling because of his feelings for Obi-Wan. And Vader's like, no, I only serve you. And again, this is a good moment because it's once again cements Vader's place on the dark side. Like, this is not a guy who's gonna, you know, teeter off the edge. This isn't like Return of the Jedi. Like, I wish I wasn't a Sith, but I can't, son. Like, this is who I am now. I'm sorry, Luke. That's not what Vader's thinking right now. He's thinking, oh, I hate myself so much, but I'm a Sith and I serve Palpatine. So we get a nice scene of Leia back on Alderaan. She puts on her holster, and her adoptive mother, who I should know her name, but other than the series, she's really not important at all. I mean, she doesn't even get brought up in Legends too often, but she actually likes the holster that she's using. And they go to meet a guest, and I was like, oh, that's kind of weird, because, you know, Alderaan's like known for demilitarizing, and that's why it's like, oh, Leia's like, oh no, we have no weapons, like, what are you doing? So it was weird for like the leader of Alderaan, this pacifist planet, to be like, oh, I'm cool with my daughter carrying around a holster. I mean, it's on brand for Leia, but, you know, still, she learned to shoot somewhere, so I guess you could say that. So Obi-Wan is the guest they're meeting, which makes a little bit more sense as to why Leia was allowed to wear the holster. Obi-Wan talks about Leia's mother and father with her, and tells like all the good traits that Padme had and all the good traits that Anakin had that got passed down to Leia. It's a very good scene. Obi-Wan's like, oh, I wish I could tell you more, but I can't, which obviously makes sense. I'm not gonna say anything about that. And Obi-Wan leaves Alderaan and goes back to Tatooine. Obi-Wan and Owen sort of make up. They talk about like, hey, Obi-Wan's like, alright, so you're right, Luke needs to grow up, he's just a boy, the future will take care of itself, it's all alright, right? And so Owen watches Obi-Wan walk away for a little bit, and he's like, hey, do you want to meet him? And so Obi-Wan goes to meet Luke. He says a really good line.
Hello there.
And then Obi-Wan heads off into the desert, and he sees a Force ghost, comes up to him, and guess who it is? Qui-Gon. I'm glad that they got Liam Neeson back, because I really enjoyed him in The Phantom Menace. I thought he was really good. I mean, Liam Neeson played him pretty good, which is why so many people are Qui-Gon fans, just because of like how he was. And Qui-Gon says, "I was here the whole time, but you just weren't ready for me to talk to you, and now you are." So they walk off, and I'm guessing this is where Qui-Gon teaches Obi-Wan how to become a Force ghost, while in Legends, he taught him how to do this he taught him a lot earlier on. He taught him like right at the end of Revenge of the Sith, at like the end of the book. Yoda was like, Qui-Gon is going to teach us stuff, and that's how the book ends off. So, as for how this episode was as a finale, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very good. I ended off things really well, at least in my eyes. I think that it wrapped up everything just as good as it needed to. Wrapped up Reva's storyline pretty good. It was weird. They should have set it up a little bit more earlier on. Had her do a little bit less terrible stuff. Show her teetering a little bit more. But other than that, we're good. Obi-Wan beating Vader was something that, was pretty predictable. I wanted it. It made sense in the story, so I'm glad with that. I like Leia, what happened with her. I like how Obi-Wan just became a better Jedi and learned to trust himself again, which will be important for when he teaches Luke later on. And all in all, as you can tell, I pretty much enjoyed pretty much every part of the episode, so I'm going to leave you off here. Once again, full series review will be out tomorrow. Hopefully, I'll be away on a trip, but it will be out tomorrow. Thank you all for watching. That was a weird intro, but bye. Outro. Jeez, bye. Alrighty, so now that the whole series has came out, I believe that it is time for me to talk about my opinion on it. So, this is a series that's been teased and talked about for years. I mean, before I was even in middle school, it got to the point where Ewan McGregor was getting embarrassed because he thought that it looked like he was begging for work, because people would ask him about it, like, hey, do you want to come back? Do you want to come back? And he'd be like, yeah, I'd love to come back. But then people just kept spinning it into articles and huge amounts of speculation, and it just, in Ewan McGregor's mind, reflected negatively on him. But I'm glad that we got the series. I thought that it was really good. I thought it was interesting what they did with Obi-Wan's character. I mean, it makes sense when you're off into the desert for years and years and years, and you got nothing really to live for except for maybe Luke being powerful enough to stop the Emperor, and even then, it's a long shot, and the guy you're trying to work with is not trusting you. He thinks that you're just going to mess up his son's life like you did his dad's life, and you're like, well, what can I really say? I mean, yeah, I failed him, but I'm gonna try harder with him. I don't know. It's really tough, and it really weighed down on Obi-Wan. And when he says, I'm not the person I used to be, that's true. He's not the person he used to be. He's not as strong. He can't do everything that he used to do simply because of atrophy. I brought this up probably 2 or 3 times, in this video, but I already am going to come back to it again. If you don't use something, you're going to lose it, no matter what you do, no matter how good you are, right? If Michael Jordan was in the 90s and he just never worked out to 2000s till now, right? And then he came onto the court, or no, from the early 90s to now, and he came off the court, your average D1 hooper could beat him. Why? Because that average D1 hooper has been working in the gym for years and years and years, and Michael Jordan just took off, right? That's why he was getting hits landed on him by average mercenaries, because even though these average mercenaries don't hold a candle to him in terms of actual genuine power, they can fight him because they've been doing this for years. When the fall of the Empire came, the rise of the Empire, and even in the fall of the Empire came about, these guys were going crazy. They were doing all types of jobs and things of that nature. They were going out, collecting bounties, doing that type of stuff. So they're always in the thick of it. Obi-Wan's cutting up meat. He's not going to be, top of his game, ready to go at all times. That's just not how it is. I like seeing Obi-Wan progressively get better and better and better. I think his first fight with Vader was handled very well. It was very terrifying just seeing Vader tear through that town like that. Episode 3. I mean, he was probably at his scariest he's ever been, for at least for me. Now, growing up, just hearing all the buzz about Vader, you really don't get that sense of fear. But watching episode 3, you can kind of get maybe this was what it was like, when Vader was walking around reading Luke's thoughts in Return of the Jedi, or when he was standing in the carbonite chamber and slowly ignited his lightsaber to fight Luke. All these things. Now, speaking of Vader, I'm going to talk about him for a little bit. Again, I thought he was handled really well. Just, as he's always been in this sort of Twilight of the Republic, Rise of the Empire type of era. He's treated as this big scary force, especially in Rebels and this show. Everyone's scared of him. The Inquisitors are scared of him. The only one who isn't visibly outwardly scared of him at any point in the series is the Grand Inquisitor. And even he has a level of respect for Vader because, Vader could end him instantly without even trying. I again really enjoyed what they did with him. I don't even know how they could have improved on Vader because I think they nailed him to a T. I think they did very well. Speaking of Vader, we're gonna go into Hayden Christensen because even though we only got one flashback with him, it was a very good flashback, and it played into episode 5 perfectly. I like how even as Vader was still using the lessons from Obi-Wan, hey, you don't always need a lightsaber, just dodging away from Reva. Oh, you think you're gonna hit me? You really think you're gonna hit me? No, you're not going to. I'm just gonna dodge away from you because that's just who I am and what I've done. Now, obviously in episode 6, we got his voice mixed in with James Earl Jones for Vader, which was very interesting. I really thought that was an interesting choice. I liked it. I thought it was interesting, how half of Vader's mouth was uncovered, so his real voice was coming out, and obviously his real voice is Hayden Christensen. There's a truck pulling out outside, but anyway, I really thought that it was handled very well, and I thought that it was very respectful towards Hayden Christensen, and I enjoyed all the love that the fandom was giving him compared to the type of love, quote unquote, that they were giving him back in 2005, which made him quit acting altogether, and then he went to soccer. So that was interesting. Now, I brought up the Grand Inquisitor a little bit ago, so we're going to go right to him. He was really good in the show, almost as good as he was in Rebels. I really liked. I might be reviewing him with rose-tinted glasses, however, because Rebels was sort of the show I grew up with. I really enjoyed watching that as a younger guy. Now, obviously, I'm sure you know that he got stabbed by Reva, and I don't mean to brag, but I 100% called. I was there's no way he dies here. Why would they kill? What dramatic sense would it make to kill off the Grand Inquisitor here in the first episode? It's not it's to establish Reva's threat because she's nothing. It was just out of nowhere. Maybe you should have sensed the devious intent, but she's probably already had that intent towards him all the time. She's just Sith-like, and what do the Sith do? They devour each other. That's always been sort of their modus operandi ever since their inception, pretty much. They've always just been at each other. So there's probably always that sense of oh, this person is going to try to kill me at some point. And he was just so worked up about how she was doing, about the case in general and what she was doing. He just had blinders on and just got stabbed, got ran through. It happens when you aren't on all 10 at all times, and he learned that the hard way. Now let's go into Reva because this is probably the best segue I'm gonna do. Alright, let's go into Reva because I've seen a lot of talk about her, and I just wanted to say some things. I thought it was interesting how she was a former Jedi youngling. She was old enough to have been at least a Padawan, I do think it was interesting how she got picked up by the Inquisitors, knowing that she had this, Jedi pass, which most of them did, of course. The Grand Inquisitor, Temple Guard, I'm sure the 8th brother was some sort of Jedi himself, and, things of that nature. But still, it's really interesting how she ended up like that, and how the only reason she became an Inquisitor was to get revenge on Anakin or Vader, right? And of course she fails at that, which leads to the Grand Inquisitor coming back and taking her out, which I thought was done very well. I think it established, how cunning the Grand Inquisitor is, because that's something I saw, in Rebels, like when he was able to instantly identify, like, oh, you trained under Devil Lava, even though I thought it was weird because, again, you were attacking with Sarisu, which I just talked about in the episode 6 review. Really don't like that, but hey, it's kind of small potatoes, I guess you could say. Let's talk about Leia. So Leia, pretty interesting. She got a little annoying from time to time, like with just how constantly wisecracking she was, like always acting like she was the smartest one in the room every time she was in a room, like no matter what. I mean, that's sort of her character, but it's handled a lot better in the movies, just because it's an adult and it makes more sense. Also, she's got like Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill to bounce off of, so again, makes more sense. Her arc with Obi-Wan was really sweet. At first she didn't trust him, and then she trusts him completely and gets mad at him for wanting to go chase Vader off. Gets mad at him for wanting to go chase Vader off, which I thought was, really nice change in pace for her character. Thought it was really well done, really handled well, and thought that maybe Obi-Wan could have gotten onto her a little bit more when she tried to wave down that random transport on Rapuzo, but other than that, she was good for the most part. Now Owen was really understandable, not trusting Obi-Wan after he failed completely with Anakin and basically plunged the galaxy into darkness, or at least contributed to it by training Anakin and making him this powerful source, which honestly, as soon as they brought him to Coruscant, they pretty much doomed themselves, but that's another discussion for another time. Now, I really liked him. I thought it was weird how Beru easily convinced him to stay behind and fight somebody who they were clearly not prepared to fight, and then she took a gun and shot both of them. I don't know what he expected her to do. It wasn't supposed to be a debilitating strike. It was meant to be something that disoriented for a second, so she could go after the other guys. She probably perceived him as less of a threat and went after the easier target. I thought Rogan was really good, unwilling to help Kenobi because his wife got killed because she was a Jedi, and he just wants to distance himself from all Jedi business, which is probably a good idea, especially in this era, because it probably isn't going to end up too good for you. In all honesty, you're probably going to end up in a bad spot. And Rogan very nearly ends up in multiple bad spots, especially throughout episodes 5 and 6. I'm glad that he made it out alive, and as I said earlier, I thought that him and Obi-Wan bonded very well. I thought that he was very smart. I'm kind of confused on his role in the whole spy network. It seems like he's the leader, but everybody's still listening to Obi-Wan, even though because these people are anti-Empire doesn't mean they're pro-Jedi. I'm personally, obviously this stuff isn't real, but personally, I don't think the Empire is good. I think they've done a lot of horrible things, blow up people's planets and stuff. But that doesn't mean I like the Jedi. I think that the Jedi had a lot of shortcomings. I think that they could have done things a lot better, especially when it comes to Anakin and just laws about love in general. I think I pretty much talked about every main character. Do want to talk about the bait and switch, and then that is all. So people were talking about a constant bait and switch, how things were going to be focused on Reva, and they really were not. There was a main focus on Obi-Wan for pretty much the entire thing. Now, they showed Reva chasing him, and I think they should have shown Vader a little bit more, but I think it operated well in sort of establishing Vader as, again, that looming threat that's coming, right? And he's scary, and this is the real deal right here. Inquisitors, Reva, that's small potatoes, but when Vader gets here, that's when it's really going down. So kind of mixed on it, but yeah, overall I thought this was a really good series. I really enjoyed seeing Ewan McGregor back as Obi-Wan again. Do I really want a second season? No, the British call it a second series, but no, I think we're good here. I'm pretty much satisfied. I'm glad that we got to see 2 more Anakin versus Vader fights. Glad that the line when we last met, I was about to learn her. Now I am the master line got fulfilled. I'm probably butchering that. All in all, once again, great series. Loved it. Thank you all for watching this probably long review. See you guys later. Goodbye.